On today's show, we'll get into everything from what became a very important win for the Hawks on this Friday evening, outlasting the Los Angeles Clippers, a final score of 112 to 106, and really more importantly, in some respects, avoiding a three-game losing streak and really avoiding a perilous loss as the Hawks approach this crunch time of the season. So we'll get into everything from this game, look ahead to the future, and really break down what was sort of a ho-hum victory, but also ho-hum victories this time of year are very, very nice for the Atlanta Hawks.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1196 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening into Saturday. And thank you for making this podcast, the Locked On Hawks podcast, your first listen each and every day. Check out the show and subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify. And also, we are now on a newly launched YouTube channel. Check that out today. And please, please, please subscribe to support the podcast. Today's podcast, we'll get into what became a very nice win for the Hawks at home, 112-106 over the Los Angeles Clippers at State Farm Arena. They avoided a third straight loss. They got a little bit perilous down the stretch, which we'll get into later on. But now the Hawks actually, as much as it's been up and down this entire season from start to finish, really, they're 12-2 in their last 14 home games. They're now 20-13 at home this season. So let's just say Atlanta's been pretty kind to the Hawks this year. Road games, not so much, but tonight we can focus on what became a nice win. And with the exception of a pretty ugly swoon in the second quarter, it was a pretty good performance from the Hawks. They were the better team, the more talented team for sure, and playing at home, you're supposed to win. But a lot of times, as Hawks fans can attest, this year, they've been in a spot where they should have won the game, and they were not able to do so. In this one, it got a little bit tight late, but they were able to hold on and pick up a badly needed victory. So we'll get into all of what transpired here, but sort of context coming in. The Hawks, of course, played in Los Angeles against this Clippers team back in January. LA, it's been kind of a weird season. They're actually above 500 for the season, which is a credit to Ty Lue and this roster, because if you look at just the roster that was available for the Clippers in this game, it was not fantastic. And it's been that way the entire year. Just for reference, Kawhi Leonard, of course, still out. Paul George, still out. Robert Covington, who they traded for at the deadline, is out. Norm Powell, who they traded for at the deadline, is also out. So basically, while they've been shorthanded all season long, that's 4 of their top 8 guys probably, and clearly their top 2 guys. Powell somewhere in that 3, 4, 5 range for them. So this was actually the same group that they started against the Hawks back in January when the Hawks lost to the Clippers. But in that game, Hunter and Capella did not play for Atlanta. So a little bit more of a level playing field this time around. And of course, the home court advantage going to Atlanta. On the Hawks side in this game, no injuries at all to report in the pregame. There was one note of news on Thursday into Friday. Jalen Johnson was assigned to College Park, and the Skyhawks actually play on Saturday. Sharif Cooper was already there, of course. So the only 2 guys that were not active and available in this game were those 2 guys. I will say that it's very clear that John Collins is not himself and not healthy right now. He was not listed on the injury report, but coming into the game, he had this massive tape job on his finger to the point where the broadcast actually caught Vince Carter, seemingly showing him how to tape it up, and he was not listed on the injury report. But after the game, Nate McMillan was asked about Collins' status. I'm going to read the quote here from Sarah Spencer. She transcribed this. I don't have the video, so my apologies on that. But Nate says, and I'm quoting now, "I'm not going to tell you everything. I just respect him for his effort. And he does have some things that are going on that he's trying to play through," end quote. So Collins has referenced the foot, which, of course, he was out of commission for a while. Since he came back, he's not been the same guy. But whether it's the foot or the finger or what's going on there, Collins clearly not at full strength, even if he was actually available to play in this game. And final piece of pregame context, the Hawks were 7.5-point favorites at BetOnline, our friends over there, before this game started. And for comparison's sake, the Hawks were also 7.5-point favorites on Monday in Detroit. Of course, they lost that game, but just that kind of tells you that the Hawks were pretty comfortably supposed to win this game, quote unquote, by the projections in the betting market. And they were able to hold serve, although they did not cover by the end of this game. But alas, unless you were on the Hawks side of that frame, nobody's really too bothered by that. As for the game itself, they got a nice bucket out of the pick and roll in the first possession of the game, which is good to see. The Hawks have not been running a ton of pick and roll recently, but Trey found Collins for an easy bucket. The Clippers tried to throw a lot at the Hawks, and Ty Lue is a good defensive coach. In fact, the Clippers are good defensively without elite personnel, and you really saw that in this game. They threw a lot, whether it was traps or blitzes or playing drop coverage, maybe some switching. I will say this: whenever they dropped against Trae Young in pick and roll, Trae got comfortable and was carving it up. But other than that, it was a little bit sort of hit and miss at times. Trae got downhill a lot at the outset of this game. The Hawks scored their first, I believe, 16 points in the paint in this one. Capella was very active at 6 points, 2 blocks, 3 rebounds in about 5 minutes at the outset here. Clippers used some zone defense early, which the Hawks took some time to get used to. They were more effective when they pushed the pace and kind of didn't allow the Clippers to set up their zone, which is usually sort of a logical thing to do, but it's not always as easy to execute in practice. An interesting challenge from Nate McMillan in the first quarter of this game, which I actually will defend him for. I am someone that usually does not want to use a challenge in the first quarter, particularly if it's not going to be a 3-shot foul or something like that. And it was really sort of confusing on the surface if you were not paying close attention. I knew kind of right away because, of course, I'm looking at the box score and all that stuff in front of me. But he challenged a play that was not even a scoring play in the first quarter. It's just a very strange thing. But it would have been Trae Young's second foul. And while Trae is not a huge foul guy, I would not have been worried basically about him getting a second foul because he's not a high foul player. But if you're Nate and you're a traditionalist and you don't like to have guys out there with foul trouble, quote unquote, challenging there with your best player, also rewarding him for playing defense because he drew a charge in that spot. And of course, Nate also won the challenge. It was a bad call very clearly when it happened. So the combination of trying to avoid the second foul for Trae, rewarding Trae's effort, and also, winning the challenge is enough to sort of justify it, even if it was sort of a low leverage play in a vacuum. So pretty interesting stuff there. Regardless, though, from there, the rotation was interesting in this one, and we'll come back to it probably later on as well. But at the beginning, it was pretty normal. Bogdanovich is the first guy. Gallinari's been coming in a little bit ahead of Okongwu, so they've been playing Collins at center in both halves for a few minutes. And this time around, it was actually against the zone, which was effective, giving the Hawks some more shooting. But then, and I noticed this right away, I actually was talking to Kevin Huerter as it was happening, friend of the podcast, Kevin Huerter of Hawks.com. But Lou Williams came into the game before DeLon Wright did. And as soon as that happened, I put a pin in it, and I was like, I think DeLon's out of the rotation in this game. Because basically, if you've been following the Hawks for a while, DeLon comes in first usually, and then Lou will come in when Trae comes out in the first half in particular. So when Lou came in before DeLon and alongside Trae, I was like, oh, that's a little bit strange because that's usually the DeLon role. And DeLon Wright, while he actually played in the second half, he only played in the second half because Hunter got 4 fouls. And McMillan said after the game, and I give him credit for this because Nate is usually not the most candid in giving away his mentality stuff on the record, but he basically said after the game they're going to use a 9-man rotation from this point on, at least for a while, and that does not include DeLon Wright. It seems he talked about how he's talked to DeLon. I will credit DeLon, and so did Nate, for staying ready because he actually gave them good minutes in the second half when they were sort of in a pinch. But it looks like for now they're going to go with 9 guys. I'll come back to this, I'm sure, but I don't like this, to be honest with you. I know I have a reputation for liking DeLon Wright a lot, and that's definitely the case. But I think that it's just not the right decision. I think DeLon has helped them this year. I think his defense is very valuable on a team that's not been playing well defensively this year. Pros and cons, I think Lou has been playing better basketball recently than he was early in the year. That's definitely maybe part of this, but I still like DeLon as a rotation player. But that decision's been made, and I'm sure we'll come back to it repeatedly in the coming days. But for now, looks like it's going to be that 9, and then DeLon will be the 10th guy. That'll sort of be the on-off kind of player. At any rate, the Hawks played very well offensively in the first quarter. They had a 137 offensive rating. They shot 60% from the floor and were 8 of 8 at the line in the first. That'll do it, obviously, is a very, very positive takeaway there. They held the Clippers to less than a point per possession in the first quarter as well. So, all that said, they were leading by 9 at the end of the first. And I thought defensively they were pretty crisp and they executed pretty well. They were active. They were attentive as well. The one, as I sort of mentioned quickly earlier, the one swoon in this entire game for the Hawks, other than maybe crunch time a little bit, was the second quarter. And it really sort of the middle of second quarter. They went to a bench plus Huerter lineup at the outset, and they both lead to as many as 11 points. But then the Clippers had a 19-2 run in the middle of the quarter to go from down 10 to up 7. The starters started coming back a little bit during that run, but the Clippers were hot from 3. They were 8 of 12 at the outset. Not huge volume there by any means, but they were making them. Hunter got a flagrant 1 that was pretty soft, I thought, on Luke Kennard. That gave the Clippers some free points and the ball. And the Hawks also sputtered on offense at the same time, which is usually the makings of a run. Was bad defense, bad offense. That happened. 2 points in about 4.5 minutes for Atlanta. They were 0-6 from the floor with 3 turnovers in that stretch. But fortunately, and this is sort of a resilient point that the Hawks, I think, probably could have noted as one of the reasons why they won this game, They got an 8-0 run down the stretch of the first half to sort of right the ship. Capella gets a dunk on the final possession, and they go into the halftime with a 1-point lead. Now, they did not play well in that second quarter overall, but closing strong there, not letting it fester, I thought was pretty big. And to be up at the half after all of that was very helpful. The Hawks had a 125 offensive rating in the first half. Obviously, that's pretty strong overall against a good defense. They took care of the ball. No free throw attempts in the second quarter. That was sort of the one negative there, but they won the glass the entire game, offense and defense. Trey was good in the first half, 14, 7, and 5 for him before halftime. They did allow their worst defensive quarter in the second as well, in addition to the offensive struggles at times. 35 points to the Clippers in that period, but only one offensive rebound for the Clippers. That's obviously a little bit easier to sort of boost your efficiency. So overall, the Hawks didn't play a perfect half by any means, but to not play a perfect half and still be winning was not too bad after the swoon that was in that second quarter. Before we get to the second half of this game and much more, a word from our sponsors on the show today. It's that time of year again as the tournament's finally upon us in college basketball with all the latest odds, totals, player props, futures, exotics, and much more. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. And beyond that, BetOnline remains the best spot on the internet for your sports scores, your podcasts, and your news this season. And of course, it's not just basketball, even if we love basketball on this podcast, because BetOnline has a full slate of offerings that includes live betting and your favorite casino games. In addition, they have really all the sports you could possibly want: hockey, boxing, UFC, auto racing, golf, tennis, soccer, baseball is back, entertainment, and horse racing odds, plus every single prop you could possibly think of. Head to BetOnline right now or use a mobile device to learn about all of the trends and the action today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we'll dig in now to the second half of this one. And I referenced it earlier, but Hunter got his fourth foul with about 10 and a half minutes to go in the third. And they went to Bogdanovich quickly, which kind of opened the door for the DeLon Wright minutes later on. The Clippers were also more aggressive in hunting Trey on defense. Early in the third quarter, they had Amir Coffey Trey was trying to guard Amir Coffey, and Coffey's not like a star or anything like that, but he had a big game against the Hawks actually in January, and he was really kind of going at Trey. He has a huge size advantage, of course. Sort of a tough ask for Trey to guard him, but also it was him and Reggie Jackson, who I don't think the Hawks want him on either. So Trey, fortunately, got comfortable on offense and was carving them up a little bit in that period. I tried to mix it up a little bit with our defensive coverages, the Clippers did, but to, let's just say, mixed success at that point. The Hawks were pretty good on offense in that third quarter. There was one run by the Clippers at 7-0 run in the middle of the period, but for the most part, the Hawks were in control of the third quarter. Marcus Morris, the starting power forward for the Clippers, was ejected with about 3.5 minutes to go in the third. He's always seemingly in something with the Hawks, dating back to Washington and other things that's been happening over the years, but that was helpful for Atlanta because he's their best power forward. Obviously, he's kind of, let's just say, not exactly a fan favorite of Hawks fans, but he is their best four available. So that him not being there was sort of a nice swing in favor of the Hawks. And then Gallo had a couple of big plays late in the third quarter. He had a big three to force a timeout, which was good to see. Also, at one point, Gallo had this stretch in this game where he had a banked-in three, and then he also had a dunk within a few minutes of each other. Kind of funny stuff there. But Gallo had some hits and misses, which we'll come back to later on. Like I said, DeLon played late in the third, I think, to keep Hunter off the floor, but I thought he gave him good minutes. But no one scored in the fourth quarter for a while, almost 3 minutes, but the Hawks were winning, so that wasn't so bad. They came back to Trey after that, and the play of the game, in terms of the highlight of the game, was Onyeka Okongwu dunking a monster lob dunk over Zubac, who is a massive human being, plus the foul. Okongwu hanging on the rim was fun. Collins had a bench reaction that the broadcast caught that was fun. And the Hawks went up by 8 points on that play. So winners all around there, from Trey to Okongwu to the reactions, and a lot of fun in the building there. But the Hawks didn't score there for a little bit after that, and the Clippers got it down to 6. But I would say the two biggest single shots of this game both came from Kevin Huerter. With 5 minutes to go, he had a huge three that was actually sort of a late shot clock heave. Not the greatest look in the world, but he had to shoot it. He created it, and he made it. Put the Hawks up by 9. That was a big shot. But they sort of gave it back a little bit after that. Trey took a couple bad shots in this stretch, but then Huerter hit another three to go up by 10 with under 4 minutes to go. Those two shots were very, very big in terms of timing and also just being threes. But from there, the Hawks were up 10. And I noted this because later it got a little bit tight. So up 10, 340 or so to go. But then Trae goes for another dagger. He misses it. Clippers score back-to-back in a 6-point game. Then Gallo misses a decent look in the post. They get a dunk, the Clippers do, and then suddenly it's a 4-point game with 2:30 to go. Then Trae answers with a gorgeous pass, by the way, just a perfect pass to Capella for a dunk. The Clippers score again. Huerter misses an open three. Gallo then misses on the offensive rebound. And then after Zubac seals Gallinari for an easy jump hook, the Hawks lead is down to 2 with less than a minute to go. I'll stop here just to say this. Collins did not close the game. And this time around, I was baffled by that. If you're listening to the show earlier this week on Wednesday into Thursday, I noted that Collins did not close in the Bucks game, and I thought it was actually defensible because Collins did not play well at all on Wednesday. This time around, though, he was better in this game than he was on Wednesday. He wasn't great, but he was better than that. And Gallinari did not really have it going at that point. And really, it was very clear that the Clippers were targeting Gallinari and of course, Trae, but especially Gallinari in that stretch. And I think, honestly, if you were going to go without Collins, it would have been more defensible, particularly without Marcus Morris on the court, to go to Bogdanovich. Like, I would not have minded that. If they had gone to Trae, Huerter, Bogey, Hunter, and a center, which was Capella at this point, I would have understood that. But I didn't like going to Gallo there. It didn't burn them because they obviously won the game. But I thought even just for defense, having Collins out there would have been helpful. But even offensively, Gallo was not really doing all that much at that point. At any rate, another big shot out of a timeout. Hunter gets to the rim and sort of hits a floater off the glass that ended up being a shot that kind of gave the Hawks the cushion that they kind of had to have. And the Clippers had this awful possession. Now, I will note, I think it was Kevin Huerter or Glenn Willis, one of those guys shared this clip on Twitter. But if you watch it back, and I watched it a couple times, Capella has a great defensive possession on this play. So credit to the Hawks for getting that out of them. But the Clippers, down by 4, wasted like 15 to 18 seconds. Like, they had a 2-for-1 chance, and they just couldn't get anything going there. Settled for a bad shot. And once the Hawks got that stop and the defensive rebound, it was basically over. They got the ball to Trae. He gets fouled, makes both, and the game is over from there. So it got tight. Like I said, the lead going down to 2 with under a minute to go was not ideal in this game, and sort of shades of the season. And listen, if they had lost this one, it would have been a heartbreaker, and it would have been another one of those like added to the list kind of things. But man, it would have been a bad loss at the end of this one had they lost it. But they were able to hold on and get a solid victory. So as far as takeaways are concerned, the offense was pretty good. There was that one swoon second quarter, of course. Clippers, again, are like number 7 in the league in defense this season. And the Hawks scored very well, a 122 offensive rating while shooting only 9 of 31 from 3. That is impressive stuff elsewhere. 58% on twos. They were excellent on the glass. They had 28 assists and 10 turnovers. That's a great ratio, of course. 54 points in the paint, 17 of 19 from the free throw line. Not huge volume there, but made them all, obviously. So aside from the three-point shooting, which is, of course, there's always going to be some variance there, they did very, very well across the board on offense in this game. And that was helpful in the quest to score enough points to win, of course. Defensively, the numbers are not great in this game. That's not a huge surprise. The Hawks have been bad defensively for most of the season. But I thought the Hawks were actually pretty good outside of about a 5-7 minute stretch in the second quarter. They did a good job. They held the Clippers down to 21 points in the fourth. They stiffened when they needed to. They only allowed 17 free throw attempts. That's a pretty good number overall. They won the turnover battle pretty clearly, and also they dominated the glass in this game. And when I say dominated, I actually mean dominated. And it was not just Capella. Like, often it's Capella that's just anchoring things. But on the defensive glass, you had Kevin Huerter with 7 defensive rebounds. Gallo had 6 defensive rebounds. Trae had 4. It was gang rebounding. Obviously, Capella was the big, in terms of like the box out guy, and Okongwu was grabbing the offensive glass. But the Hawks were really good on both ends of the floor on the glass. They ended up taking 8 more shots than the Clippers did in this game, and that's usually a positive factor when trying to win. So after all that, I will just leave you with this tidbit before we get to the player evaluations. The Hawks did not play their A game, but they did not play their C- or D game either. This was a solid performance. That's not going to inspire anybody. I understand that, but I'll use the word steady. It was a steady win from the Hawks. They played well enough. And really, there haven't been that many games like this year where the Hawks just kind of do what they're supposed to do. Not in a great way, not in a bad way, just kind of hold serve. And while this isn't everything, they won this game by 6 points, and they were favored by 7.5 points. And that's probably a good indication of like what this game was kind of went the way that it was supposed to go in some respects. And I don't want to overstate that. The Hawks had to make the plays, but they were good when their best guys played. They were +8 when Trae played in the game, and they just did enough to win. And sometimes that's all you have to do, even when you're trying to string wins together. We'll get into later on what's going to happen over the weekend. And they have a couple of games that are even easier on paper than this one was, but there are no gimmies, and they won this one, and that's all that matters in this spot. So before we get to the rest of the podcast and player evaluations and a look ahead to the future, a word from our sponsors on the show today. It's March, and usually by this time of the year, I've given all my resolutions for the new year. But in 2022, I'm sticking to the one that is closest to me right now, and that's to eat right with a hat tip to Built Bar. It really feels like it's not even really a resolution anymore because I actually enjoy eating Built Bars. There's the protein-infused puff bars that are fantastic, and there's all kinds of other flavors and fan favorites from Built Bar. And each and every bar is covered 100% chocolate, which makes a huge difference, and they taste fantastic. On top of the taste, they are low calorie and high protein. Built Bars can easily replace your candy bars, and really both in taste and to improve your nutrition. If you go to Built.com right now, check out the nutrition page. You'll be blown away because Built Bars contain only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein with a very low calorie count. In terms of flavors, there's all kinds of favorites like coconut almond and mint brownie, and some new flavors coming all the time. Each flavor is delicious, and really there is never a shortage of new flavors and new options for you to try. The best way to check out all things from Built Bar is go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. If you do that, 15% off on your order with Built Bar. That's promo code LOCKED15, 15% off if you go to Built.com. All right, we'll get into the player evaluations now. And like I said, a 9-man rotation, kind of a 9.5, because DeLon ended up playing in the second half for 5 minutes. He was +1, had a steal, 2 points. I thought he played well, and just veteran presence, kind of just being ready to go there. Lou did not have it in this one. He was pretty good the last 3 or 4 games before this, but he was 1-6 from the floor, and defensively, obviously, always a mess. So kind of a tough night to explain that you're going to go with Lou over DeLon because Lou was not good. You know, I'm not saying it's the worst decision in the world. I want to stress that. I think DeLon does more things that help you win than Lou does right now, but Lou obviously has higher upside on offense, and we can have that discussion at a later date. But I don't love it. But that's what's happening. So Okongwu had some moments. Ground the offensive glass, had the dunk of the night by far, like I mentioned before, but only 2 assists from the floor. 6 points, 9 rebounds, though, 17 minutes. That's obviously good. Had 5 fouls, though. Okongwu just continues to foul at an alarming rate. I don't think he's been playing all that well by his standards since he came back from the injury. I'm not sure if that's related or not. Not that he's been bad, but just not quite as impactful, I don't think. But the offensive glass stuff was really helpful in this game. And, of course, the memorable dunk that he had. Bogdan Mcdonough was not fantastic either by his standards, but also was a positive influence. 11 points on 12 shots is not great, but he had 6 assists, which was the only guy on the team other than Trey to have more than 3. He had 6 there, so that's good to see with only 1 turnover. But he was 4 of 5 on 2s, but only 1 of 7 on 3s. It's going to happen sometimes, but I thought he played okay, just didn't make shots. Gallo, on offense, kind of the same thing. 13 points on 12 shots is not fantastic, but not terrible. 6 rebounds, 3 assists, no turnovers, was +3. Defensively, it was a mess, as it often is, but he made enough shots. I still would have gone to Collins down the stretch, or at least gone to Bogey down the stretch, but we sort of litigated that before. To the starters, Collins, another quiet night at the office, 9 points, 3 rebounds in 23 minutes. I mentioned the quote from Nate earlier in the podcast, but he does not look like himself. He was better than he was on Wednesday. That's a small consolation, but they got to get him right. I mean, this is not the same team. People were asking me, I don't want to say people. There were a couple people in the last couple of days asking me if they're better off without Collins, etc. That's silly for me. I think he's still their second best player. Maybe the third best player if you want to say that Capella has been really, really good recently. But I think Collins is still really good. I'm not concerned, but obviously if he's not 100% healthy, that becomes a problem. I still like him playing more than Gallo for the most part, but they're definitely managing him. And Nate was kind of cryptic with his injury stuff, but that'll be something to keep an eye on. And we'll see if they list him in the injury report for Sunday's game. Hunter had a relatively unassuming day, but wasn't too bad. 12 points on 7 shots, 2 rebounds, had an assist. Did have 5 fouls and had the 4 early in the third, had to sit for a long time, but I thought he was okay in this game. Huerter hit a couple big shots, like I mentioned before, the 2 big shots of the game. 16 points, 4 of 8 from 3, 6 of 12 from the 4. 8 rebounds, that's a huge number for Huerter. Not usually on that level rebounding-wise. Had 2 assists and a steal. I thought he played quite well. Willing, able to shoot shots. 36 minutes is a ton for him. And I saw this framed by somebody, I can't remember who, so my apologies on this for now. But one of the things about the DeLon rotation change is that there is an argument if you're going to just push minutes up for Bogdanovich and Huerter and Hunter, then it's a lot easier to not play DeLon Wright. And I would agree with that. I would still play DeLon over Lou. I want to be clear about that. But if you are going to play Huerter 36 minutes a game, which is what's happened tonight, then it's a little bit more defensible, alas. Capella, I thought, was really good again. 14 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, steal, 2 assists, +4, 7-9 from the floor. That's really good stuff from Clint all the way around. I thought he actually could have came in a little bit earlier in the fourth quarter, to be honest with you, but I thought he was very good. And sort of microcosm of the game was that last possession where he just kind of tortured the Clippers offense, and he was doing that a lot in this game. And then Trae Young, a nice night at the office. Trae wasn't like his A+ self, but he also wasn't a C either. He played very well. 27 and 11 for Trae, 5 rebounds as well. 8 of 17 from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3, but got to the line 12 times. So he was efficient. He was productive, +8. Defensively had some moments. He wasn't always fantastic, obviously by his standards, but I thought he was at least competing at times, especially when the Hawks were having their better moments in this game. He was at least a part of that, was active enough defensively, getting some deflections, had a steal. So a good night at the office overall for Trae. As for the standings, we will not have the updated standings right now because the Wizards, as I'm recording this, are playing on the West Coast. So that's something to keep an eye on what the Hawks do with this game. They tie the Hornets again. Charlotte won on this evening as well, knocking off New Orleans. They scored 142 points in New Orleans, kind of a crazy number there, but those two teams are still tied. Brooklyn is still a game and a half ahead of the Hawks. Toronto is going to be either 3 or 4, depending on their result. They're actually late in the game right now as I'm recording this. And then if the Wizards win, it'll be a game and a half. But if the Wizards lose in LA, the Hawks will go back to having a 2.5 game lead on the Wizards, which is not too bad of a place to be right now, at least according to making the play-in. I sort of alluded to this earlier, but from here, the Hawks go back home. The Hawks stay at home and play 2 games in 2 days on Sunday and Monday. It's a home back-to-back. Those are a little bit easier because you don't have to travel in the middle, but still back-to-back. But the first game has a huge advantage in that they play the Pacers, who are sort of rebuilding. They're still talented on some level, but Indiana's not playing well right now. They don't have a great roster right now. And also, it's a back-to-back with travel for the Pacers. So between the Hawks not having to travel, having a day off, Indiana's roster, Indiana's travel, the Hawks are going to be big favorites on Sunday. Again, nothing is assured right now in the NBA, especially for the Hawks, who have not been consistent this year. That's a game in which they're going to be big favorites, barring some injury stuff. And then Monday, they play the Blazers. Again, it's back-to-back, but Portland is in a similar boat to Indiana, that they are not playing well right now in terms of like they're playing up the string, not a whole lot to play for the Blazers. As I speak, they've lost 6 games in a row. So, some favorable matchup stuff for the Hawks. I tweeted this earlier before the game started today, but the Hawks are going to be favored in all 3 of these games. Obviously, they won the one tonight, and if they win them all, they're back to 500. Now, famously, they had a chance to do that again on Monday in Detroit. They were favored in that game, and they lost. So nothing is given to you. But the Hawks, after this victory, have some positive momentum going. The schedule is very light, as discussed before. I believe even still coming into today, they have the number 29 schedule strength in the league. That is obviously second easiest. That's what you want to see. So there's still time for a run. Not all hope is lost for the Hawks, but the clock is also ticking because I think everybody knows this at this point, but only 16 games remaining. So if the Hawks were to, post a 12-4 down the stretch, that would obviously get you to 44 wins and put you in a good position. But if they don't have that run in them, then we'll see. So after all that, I'm going to leave it here for the podcast. A solid night at the office for the Hawks, a good Friday night win, and we'll come back to have full coverage on Sunday into Monday. One plea, please subscribe to the podcast via the platform of your choice. On the audio side, whether it be Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, all those places. If you enjoy the show, please leave 5-star ratings. Those very much help. I've been told to push those for sure on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Also, reviews on Apple are also very helpful to help spread the word on the show. And I've been saying this a lot recently, so my apologies, but I'll say it again here. We're trying to get the YouTube channel off the ground, and my goal, the network goal, is to have the Locked On Hawks podcast have 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of the season. We're getting close, sir. Not close yet, let's just say, but it takes 2 seconds. So if you like the podcast, or if you want to just spread the word, help us out, get your family and friends to do that same thing, subscribe, download, all that stuff. There are easy ways to support the show, and that's definitely one of them. So thank you in advance for that. Please follow me on Twitter if you'd like to at BT Rowland. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks, and we'll see you after the game on Sunday.